on the show today, Ilan Stephani. So some of you may have heard Ilan as part of the Plague Dialogues. Ilan is an embodiment teacher focusing on intimacy. She has a business called Carly's Kiss, which is a fun name. And I'm really enjoying getting to know this human being. So kind of tired today from working on all these crazy projects with doctors and embodiment circles online. And it's really nice to see you.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for inviting me.
Where are you and how are you?
I'm in Berlin, so just another part of our global mess. I think everybody here is tuning into the kind of intensity. I'm doing so myself. But I also feel like I think I've never been that grateful for knowing or studying embodiment and nervous system as in these times. Truly, it's like if I wouldn't know about the dimensions of breath and down regulation, no matter what, I would like to collapse.
Right. Yes. So let's start there before we hear a bit about your personal story. I think people are interested in that. Like, where do you think we're at in the kind of curve in terms of, nervous system spiking and then dropping maybe, and how can, these embodied practices help with this?
Oh, such an interesting question. So my personal estimation, let's come from a collective level, is we are behind the point or the phase where we carried around our everyday habit of freaking out about something. Yeah. It's like Corona, oh my God, let's have a problem. We mature in a way or in a pace that is amazingly fast. And I'm somehow, I do not say that often, but I'm somehow proud about how we are doing as mankind with the maturity of, okay, these are tough times, so there is nobody to blame. We are supposed to go through this together. At the same time, I think what is in front of us is some kind of deepened, felt sense of death, of helplessness. There is something where our fear is truly needed as a life force in our nervous system for managing a challenge that is truly real. We kind of have to go beyond the kindergarten level of let's freak out, but we will need this. I mean, we will need our current level of maturity and even more.
So that freak out isn't sustainable, is it, as well? Because this is a marathon, not a sprint, right?
Exactly.
Like we're a few weeks in now for most places.
We can't afford our burnout by now. We can't.
2nd of April, I had the initial surge of, right, let's help the yoga teachers, right, let's help the embodiment community, right, let's help doctors. And then I'm like, okay, hang on. These projects are going to be going for at least another 10 weeks, possibly another year, maybe 18 months, who knows.
Exactly.
My relationship needs to be sustainable with my wife. We're out of that emergency, right? We're in survival mode together into like, okay, hey, why is your mess on the floor there?
Exactly.
Like daily stuff. And
embodiment is all about from this being driven by the head brain, bowing again to the belly brain, to the deep wisdom in our soles of our feet, etc. So this embodiment practice is somehow, there are huge brains in my body that are designed for going for a marathon without freaking out, without panicking. But if I wouldn't be educated somehow to look into this direction, I would just be stuck in my head.
And I want to echo what you said there about this is a real threat. So most of us, our whole lives, unless someone's done extreme sports or martial arts, which seem like mere attempts to find real threat, like, these things that are so popular now, most of us have got our whole lives freaking out about perceived threat. Like someone on Facebook said a thing I didn't like. This is not existentially threatening, yet somehow we react as if it is. And now we're adjusting to a threat that is, at least potentially for some people in some way, actually a life or death threat. And that is a shift.
Exactly. And it's like a shift that replaces our made-up problems by true challenges. And I do think that we do not feel safe by having our comfort zone and having everything delivered to the bed or the breakfast, but something of, we want the whole range of aliveness in our jungle. There is something of, we are not satisfied, and we can't truly downregulate in a sense that is truly alive and intense enough when we are stuck in made-up problems. It's somehow, I perceive the challenges due to Corona, etc., as something that is involuntary. But to some extent, a part in me is satisfied for the first time in my life because I have to face the jungle as a tigress, and I'm meant to do so. There is like no way around.
This is an unnatural situation. This is to be communing with local people, to be having, worrying about food, even to be having existentially threatened. This is actually how we evolved. This isn't new.
Yes. This is where we know how to live. And when we're in our kind of privileged culture that can make everything apparently be somewhere else that truly is part of the global mess or suffering, we are dissatisfied. Our fast food satisfaction isn't satisfaction. It's a shutdown in our nervous system around, I'm here to live. I'm here to be afraid of death. I'm here to be shaken awake or shaken in my nervous system because life is intense and it's meant to scare me, and it's meant to meet me and to beat me.
And we are seeing a dropping away of some bullshit right now, for sure. I mean, some of the gender war stuff, which I think we'll get into, I see in a whole new perspective now, and I think other people do too. Maybe we'll get into that. But before we do, normally we start these interviews by asking about the person's life story. And you've had an interesting one, so I definitely want to at least sort of establish your story for people who are listening to this and going, who is this crazy German lady? So what got you interested in the body, Ilan?
Oh, did I already somehow made clear that I'm crazy?
Always. Listen, I've got a pink drink to match the top of your pink jumper.
Thank you so much. So we will publish this video in order to show that this is
we have to do the
choreography.
Video, not just the audio for this one. Actually, we're starting doing more videos on YouTube. So those of you who listen to the podcast, if you want to watch videos, some people are more visual, then you can go to our YouTube channel. It's the Embodiment channel.
Yes, because both of us prepared ourselves in pink.
Look, I put a shirt on for the doctors this morning. Yeah. You've got your nice pink jumper. I think people should see it, Ilan.
We didn't sleep. We just talked about our outfit, Mark and Ilan. Can I go like that?
It's so weird wearing a shirt again. I'm commuting in order to keep better work-life boundaries. I'm putting on a shirt for work like I used to when I worked in business more. And
That's why you are tired.
At the end of the day. And then I'm like out of work mode. That's my little work uniform. It's
Mark's costumes.
Boundaries in the house. Okay, tell us about your life though, Ilan. So how did you get
thank you. To be honest, my life story for me seems to be pretty boring, but the boringness or the boredom in it is maybe part of the secret, because I went into embodiment after a series of, let's say, unconscious attempts to overcome the shutdown level or the depression level or the kind of chronic boredom that is normal in my society. Or in maybe Western cultures, I have no idea. But I was like best A levels at school and A levels with 17, etc. And like nobody around me looked at me with a sense of, that could be somehow interesting or problematic, or there could be something missing in this life. And then out of my own surprise, I moved to Berlin and decided out of the blue that I would like to start working as a prostitute in Berlin. And I did so for 2 years. And these were 2 years where I felt like I meant to do this work. And I'm not talking about the spectacular aura of prostitution, but this kind of, I never learned something else but tuning into the outer world and pleasing or responding to what the outer world / for example men, for example in sex, wanted me to do or wanted me to behave.
Okay, I'm just going to come in, because before we go into the deeper side, I think, well, you've probably talked about this a lot. I know you wrote a whole book on it. For a lot of people, this is going to be pretty new and pretty interesting, right? So, like, what is it like to work as a sex worker? Is it legal? How does it work practically? Just give us like the bare bones of painting the picture of those 2 years. How was that?
Yeah, thank you. So I do not know how it is to work as a sex worker, because sex work has as many different realities as it has sex workers in. So there is no way of talking about prostitution without clarifying, I'm talking about my form of prostitution.
Okay. So what did that look like? Yeah.
Yes, it was incredibly privileged on every level. So there was nobody interfering with my sexual freedom. There was no chef. I was completely like working on my own. Even though I was working in a brothel, there was nobody above me telling me what to do or what not to do. It was only working during the days, and it was without any kind of, I don't know the English word pimp.
Yeah, pimp. Yeah, so a guy who's like
or drugs
getting
or
money out of
alcohol
you
in the background.
Uh-huh.
So, and that is why I say it was so boring, because there was nothing at all glamorous or special or in any true sense different from our private sex. And I'm not glamorizing prostitution. I rather tend from prostitution, look at our private sex life and say, hey, why are we so immature? Why does nobody tell us how to truly be interested in something else than fast food satisfaction? Like, there is no other sex world in sex work. So there is a reflection to our normal sex world in sex work.
Interesting. So some people might imagine it as like, hey, this is a horribly disembodying thing because you're having sex with people you don't have emotional connection to. And I would imagine that as a very disembodying thing. And I've talked to sex workers quite a few times, actually, particularly when I was working in Amsterdam. I talked to people there. And they talked to the experience of disconnecting from their body. And it was like, okay, I'm not really there. You know, my body's there. I'm somewhere else. This almost like trauma dissociation.
Yeah.
And that was their experience of it, that they just sort of weren't really there that much. And I said, wow, that sounds profoundly disembodying as an experience.
Yes.
But what I'm hearing you say is that's actually not so different from how most people are having sex anyway.
I mean, exactly. I'm really the last one recommending anybody to work in the sex work, but I'm the first one warning everybody for just copying what we learn about sex anyway. Our sexuality is disembodied. There is nobody apart from sex work having some kind of the position or the right to look at the sex worker and say, oh, you were dissociating during sex. Who isn't? The clients I had sex with in the brothel were at least as disembodied as I have been. Right. And there is also some kind of structural violence in patriarchal systems saying that unemotional sex is for women more hurting or traumatic than for men.
Right, so if a guy just meets a Tinder date and it's all consensual, there's no money involved, but he just, you know, is masturbating with someone else's body, as I've heard it described, you know, that to you is as disembodying as someone who, as a woman who's being paid for sex.
Exactly. There's like the only no matter what difference between private sex and sex in a brothel is, in the one setting there is money somewhere around, and in the other one it might not be that way. That's the only true difference that is given. So it's like the color of the curtains. There is a difference, yes. Right. But what the difference matters at the end of the day is not dependent on us creating a shadow world that is full of the other ones.
There is this, and this again for you is your daily life for 2 years, but for many people listening, they've never come across this. They've never talked to a sex worker. It's, you know, it's a rare and weird thing. And what I hear you saying is those things maybe aren't quite as different, you know, like there can be exchanges involved in sex. There is often, maybe that exchange isn't financial, but there's some sense of like, well, I'm gonna have sex with this person because of this other thing that I get. You know, maybe they support me emotionally and I feel obliged to have sex with them. You know, so there could be another kind of exchange there. Or
exactly.
It's not so different as you say, emotionally and embodiment wise.
Yes. I mean, exactly, coming from embodiment frames, there is no way of reawakening our sensuality as physical beings without having deep, painful insights into the kind of structural violence in our language and society. And when two people say, let's have sex with each other, or I want to have sex with you, they do not want to know what the other person is referring to internally. They just agree to this is a word that means something. But
Right.
both of them are projecting on the other one, oh, you are feeling horny and you want to have sex with me because I'm so cool. Or whatever. There is something so deeply disembodied and driven by our self-image instead of our physical energy and experience, that we somehow do not want to tap into the embodied reality of sex. Because then, for example, what we would have to deal with is the fear of men during sex, the fear of women during sex, etc., etc., etc. So all of these things are not so sexy in the first place.
Can you slow down a little bit for my brain? This is all really good stuff, and you say smart things. I want to take it in. I'm a little bit sluggish today. So I want to come back to something you said. There's this shadow world of sex work. I had an experience this a few years ago. So I'm walking down the street in Brighton, and there's a beautiful woman smoking a cigarette on the corner. She looks kind of bored. I'm on my day off. I stopped and talked to her, and we started getting on really well. And I said, oh, you seem really nice. Maybe we could have a date sometime. Can we swap numbers? Polite, respectful. And she said, yeah, but it will cost you. And I went, what? She's like, oh, well, you should know I'm a working girl. That's how she put it. Working girl is British slang for sex worker. And she said, here's my number if you want to arrange something. And these are my rates. And I'm on my cigarette break right now. And I said, well, where from? She said, well, there's this building around the corner and this back alley, not more than 500 meters from my house. So really close to where I live, there's a brothel. Yeah. And she said you wouldn't know it because it hasn't got a sign out front because it's kind of semi-legal in the UK and decriminalized, we could say, for the workers. So she said, there's the brothel. And I never went in. I wasn't particularly interested in that. It wasn't very erotic to me. So I was like, not interested, thanks, but have a nice day. And there was suddenly this moment of the shadow world being revealed. And just one more piece, if I may, on this, Ilan. I've also noticed something happening in dating in the last few years where there's a blurring. Because women no longer have to stand on street corners or working in a brothel, people can do it privately online. I've got several friends I know that have at least looked into this, female friends. And also I've come across it like in online dating where a girl said, I'll meet you, but can you just pay for my flight? Or, so for example, I've had lovers and they've said, I'd love to hang out with you in Berlin, but can you just pay for my flight to come? And we've both been in this strange place of, oh my God, is this sex work now? Yeah. Okay, no, I'm only inviting this person. I like them as a human, but I've got friends in Berlin I could also hang out with, right? And it's like, and they were like, oh, am I a sex worker? I'm getting, you're paying my flight. Is that the same? And women have been enabled to do this online in a very private way, and at a scale. So there's a sort of sliding scale now from paying for someone's flight to paying for money if you have sex with them to, the whole spectrum. And I find this really fascinating that this shadow world is being both blurred and sometimes revealed, as I sort of found in this thing in Brighton very starkly.
I mean, what the shadow world reveals when we look at it is the shadow world isn't the shadow. We created it. We made it up. There is no shadow. There is no blurring between daylight and shadow. It's us externalizing the unknown parts within ourselves. And there is some kind of collective comfort zone of looking at the other ones. And just in statistics, and okay, I'm talking about German statistics, 88% of all men in Germany at least once in a life pay for physical sex with a partner.
Wow.
And almost like 48% of all men in Germany visit a prostitute at least once a month. So who are we as a society saying that these are the other ones? And it's like, yes, you never tapped consciously into the shadow world. Who knows? Who knows, Mark? How many of your girlfriends just didn't tell you? How many of your male friends don't tell you?
Yeah. Interesting. And in Germany, is prostitution legal, semi-legal? I mean, I guess that makes a difference to the...
It's legal. You are trying to save the UK society from my statistics.
Well, I'd be very surprised if 50% of the UK regularly use a prostitute. I would be very surprised. I'm not saying it's huge. I'm not saying it's 1%, but I'd be very surprised. I mean, I've got male friends that I share everything with, and it's pretty rare here. I guess it depends on age groups, demographics. I know, for example, it's very common amongst disabled people in the UK.
Mm.
very common among special needs group, and they're apparently people who specialize in that.
Yeah.
I can imagine there's certain groups that do it more than others.
And I think it's
Economics are a
very,
factor,
very
I think, as
important to
well in
stretch that our language is violent because it provides one work, like sex work or prostitution. And it's really not about flattening the thing or those different dimensions. It's not about, sex traffic, forcing somebody to sex is such a crime. It's such a trauma. No way around that.
Yeah.
And it happens like millions of times every day on this globe. And at the same time, we do not provide us as society and mankind to truly help where it's needed when we just throw stones as everything on everything that sounds like sex work. It's truly, we need a culture of differentiation and of looking at where is my help truly needed. And just wanting to save everybody who is into sex work is some kind of violence, because in the first place, somebody could interview me, what would help me?
And there is a choice actually for some people and not for others. And that's a fairly big distinction, isn't there, between someone who's coerced or a slave or on drugs. Again, we've got a spectrum, someone who chooses but is an addict, and then we've got a spectrum right through to someone who actually, I met someone in Austin, Texas, and they were like, yeah, I have, they asked, again, was chatting to someone in a bar actually, and they were like, well, actually, I've got 3 guys who look after me. And I'm looking for a 4th, and one gives me a credit card and one gives me an apartment. And this was obviously, and she was really in shape. She was basically said, look, my job's to keep in shape and have a date with these men once a week. And in exchange, they look after me. And it was very clear this was her chosen lifestyle. And she'd made, a decision that this was actually less work than maybe working in a cafe or a bar or something. And she was essentially interviewing me. And it turned out she very quickly realized I wasn't rich enough. and I said, look, will you just stay and answer my question? Because I'm fascinated by people that are not typical. So I'm always like, so I had like 2 or 3 minutes asking her questions about it. And it was very clear to her, it was just a sort of transactional choice of, this is what I do because I don't actually want a crappy job in a call center. And this just makes more sense to me to have, basically all day I keep myself in shape. I walk dogs in the park, go to the gym. And then 4 evenings a week, I see 4 rich men. And she's like, I get to choose them. So I know none of them are evil or awful human beings. Should I choose these men? And, I started to ask her, isn't there a cost for you emotionally or in terms of intimacy? And she talked about the social cost from other people shaming her. She talked about the cost of finding it difficult to have a normal boyfriend that she actually wanted. But it was just very interesting because it broke all my assumptions of what a sex worker was, talking to these couple of women I've talked to. Yeah.
And it is, we are compromising between inner freedom and truth and energy and those outer circumstances being put on us by society. Everybody is compromising. Some of them are compromising and do not have the amount of money. Others compromise, have the amount of money, have the amount of freedom, do not have a boyfriend. So who are we, the so-called normal ones, saying that the kind of disbalance in the system happens over there instead of in myself?
I've been in jobs like I was trapped doing something I hated for 10 hours, 9 hours a day or whatever. And I thought, this is really so different.
Like the more normal, the more the kind of suffering that is suffered from by the majority is somehow then called the healthy thing. But especially, our conversation happens due to in the corona crisis, and there is something visible in us being trapped in a global disbalance that of course is reflected on every level. And this is again such a wonderful teaching from embodiment, that if there is one imbalance in one muscle in my body, it shows up in so many different places at the same time, because we are somehow interconnected and we have many different levels communicating with each other if we want it or not. So who are we thinking that my sex life is something completely different than my love life, my working life, my nutrition?
I'm imagining someone that's pretty disembodied, pretty not in touch with themselves or others, and then suddenly they get naked with their girlfriend or their boyfriend. That doesn't suddenly change, right? The situation's still there, the societal situation's still there, the embodiment's still there.
And I do think, maybe a footnote, that our challenges and immaturity and disbalances that we might face as adults in our sex life refers to unsexual conditioning that is embedded more deeply into our culture, or more deeply into our childhood, more deeply into our school education. Having to sit around and think instead of running around and developing our muscular system while we are in puberty, I would say this is a collective developmental trauma around our birthright to be moving beings. And all of those disembodiment factors being woven into our 24/7 when we grow up, we have to pay the price for that. Not only in sex, but in sex we are like, oh, I wanted ecstasy. Where is it? And it's like, well, where is your ecstasy the rest of your life as well?
Right. Well, how's your ability to contact pleasure in your own body generally?
Yes.
Contact another.
I mean, in sex we want to have a breathing orgasm, but we never breathe in front of the computer.
Right.
So how do we expect ourselves like then going into a super orgasmic heroic sprint for us and our partner? It's naive. It's running a marathon without having ever tried to go jogging in the park. That's naive.
Yeah. And back to the COVID situation then, I mean, do you see this a collective, like, I'm with you on feeling grateful for my practices. Like, I'm currently teaching doctors and nurses these practices, and I'm dealing with very smart, educated people who are really heroic right now, and most of them don't have these practices. Yeah. And part of me is almost like, oh my God, how do you get through life, let alone a crisis? Let alone what these guys are doing now, which is extreme and heroic. And then how do you get through just daily life without that? Maybe I'm a fuck up. I've needed this stuff just to function. Yeah. And then I feel so grateful to myself for having those skills and my teachers. And also it feels like, I wonder if it will be a collective wake up. There's this idea of there could be collective healing is one of your things, right? Like, is there a collective healing possible in all this?
Yeah, I mean, a collective healing is possible in all of this, but to be honest, a collective healing is possible every day. We do not need a crisis in order to wake up. We just choose to stay lazy until a crisis forces us to wake up.
It's necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes,
it's also the mother of practice.
Mankind in the normal shutdown mode around not feeling anything. Yes, of course, we need half of mankind dying or being in danger for dying before we somehow open our eyes. Okay, but that's not the nature of human nervous systems. It's the nature of our lazy culture, privileged culture, and traumatized and traumatizing culture. I would say / disembodying and disembodied culture. So to some extent, just to go into one sentence that you used, I couldn't go without it. I doubt it, Mark. You just would have to shut more down, and you would easily do that. Because dissociation is a survival mode that you were also able to tap into as a tiger or as a cheetah or as another kind of mammal. So it's like the moment we wake up, we think there is no life available without these practices. And that's true. But shutting down and dissociation tells us that everything is okay because nothing is okay. Mm. And this biology works, and it works for the majority of people.
Let's talk about gender. So within about 10 minutes of meeting you, I loved you. I was just like, you said something about men and really seemed to get men in a way that's incredibly rare. Mm. And as a man, I very quickly, when we met, like in the street in Berlin, and then we went for lunch and, introduced as a friend of a friend, I within 10 minutes, just had this huge sense of trust in you. Mm. I felt really seen as a man. And it was wonderful. And simultaneously, I felt sad at how rare that is, especially in Berlin, but I mean, all over the world.
Okay.
And I was like, oh my God, this woman likes men and understands men. And I can imagine someone coming out of a history of being a sex worker with the opposite, resenting men and hating men.
Yeah.
You were kind of famous for doing this video. Is the name From Women to Men?
From Women to Men, exactly. I participated, but a friend of mine created it.
A friend of yours created it, yes. Yeah. And it was when women saying, I mean, maybe you could say what was in that video as a starting point to this part of the conversation.
It was mainly something like 40 women standing in front of the camera, speaking to men in their life and in general, owning the female shadow of manipulating men, lying at men, contempting them, not taking them serious or on the same eye level. And it's something that I think went viral because it was some kind of unconscious collective blind spot, just something that so many women do not have to look at in the feminist narrative that is around. Men are the perpetrators and we are the victims, and men are the bad ones and we are the good ones. And the truth is, I do not want to have to decide who is the good one. We are all bad. So let's come from there. And then we have eye level. On another level, then this silly competition, who is the good sex and who is the bad sex.
Right.
And when I learned one thing about men in prostitution and after that, etc., it is the amount of sexual and social self-mistrust of men it's such an amount of suffering, and it's such an amount of blind spot for everybody. It's like, who am I not being full of love and empathy with myself as a woman in a patriarchal system and as a man as well, because there are only losers in this kind of violent structural game.
Let me just play a short clip of it, just so people can be reminded, because if 200,000 views, people have probably seen this already.
Yeah.
I am a woman. I am a woman. I am a woman who has been hurt by men. Our wounds need to be seen and to be healed. I am a woman who has hurt men.
So I'm going to pause it there because I'm not sure about legalities and other things here. But that was the key change, as I've been hurt by men was already on the agenda with Me Too, and that was a great thing and really necessary. And then the video says, I have hurt men.
Yes.
And I'm owning that there's a manipulation or female shadow. And I think it was ahead of its time, because I tried to talk about female shadow a couple of years ago and my head almost got bitten off.
Yeah.
I tried to talk about it 6 months ago and people were ready to listen. It was almost like recently, Harvey Weinstein got convicted and I kind of went, okay, is there now a stage now where we can talk about both shadows? We can talk about explicit male violence and maybe more implicit female violence.
Yeah.
Like I also went through a stage where my status and kind of micro fame had increased, and all of a sudden I was getting hit with all this feminine violence, manipulation and lies and all this sort of stuff, and I had no idea what to do. I really felt powerlessness. Like I'd trained my whole life in male violence. I'm good at martial arts. I'm good at arguing. I'm good with money. I'm good with like straightforward linear power. And all of a sudden I was getting hit by rumors and lies and secrets. And I was like, I had no idea what to do. And I really studied it the last 2 years. And I wonder if things have shifted with this crisis. What do you think?
With the crisis around gender or the crisis around Corona, what are you referring to?
Well, how they interact, I'm interested in now, because I see the gender conversation shifted.
Yeah.
And that in a way that actually I'm pleased by. Originally it was, I think a couple of years ago, it was just a very few lead edge women like you that I would have that feeling of being okay around, just okay as a man. Like, wow, I'm allowed to be a guy. Wow, that's so refreshing. And it really was a small percentage of women, small. And a lot think they have that, but I don't feel that around a lot.
Yeah.
And now I see that percentage increasing, which is a hell of a relief if you're a kind of yang male like me. Yeah. It's a hell of a relief. And also I wonder if some of the sort of gender wars bullshit will drop away. And to be clear, I don't mean, real serious issues like sex trafficking. Yeah. I mean, people getting upset with each other over stupid shit. Like, I wonder if that will drop away a little bit. Now we're in this collective, we have this collective enemy, the virus.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think there is a link between the gender discussion and gender scene and atmosphere and the Corona crisis, because again, it comes to, we have to let go of made up problems and projections that are not truly present right here or needed right here, right now, because we need our true energy and our kind of loyalty in the jungle in order to get through these truly challenging times. So there is something of, can we afford any longer to beat each other up with the competition, who is right and who is wrong? And at the same time, I hope that all those gender fragmented scenes are still active and that there are more scenes coming up adding them, because I look as mankind and also the gender discussion like it's a global nervous system and it needs every frequency. We need men who stand up against domestic violence from their girlfriends against them, because this is truly a statistic that is very real and nobody dares to talk about it. And we need people who stand up against domestic violence against women.
Sure.
Again, it's not about anybody of us who would not have a shadow. It's like, in the moment, Mark, I'm only agreeing to talk to you when you are a saint. I will never talk to you. And as long as I need for myself as a woman, suppressing my shadow, it's better not to talk to me, because I'm immature around the heritage that I come from as a nervous system in a culture, having to deal with stuff and projections. You are wounded, I'm wounded. Can we stop faking on another level than sex, that we are somehow through? Nobody is through. Nobody is good.
And it's dangerous.
When we in that, we can meet each other, and then we can see everybody in the collective mess manages a heroic job to get through.
What I mostly see with men and women, even through the heart of the gender war, which before it turned, and it still hasn't turned that much, was just men and women doing their best. Most of the time, men and women who were wounded and were trying to get on with each other. And how do you enter a relationship when it's like, I've been hurt so many times by so many men or so many women, and yet the bravery and the courage to say, and I'm going to open my heart to someone else because, hey, maybe there's a good man out there or a good woman that I can be with and it's going to be okay. Like, that's a huge courage. And also want to reinforce what you said about not denying the shadow makes you more dangerous. Like, any man who doesn't know he's a potential killer, dangerous.
What a threat.
Any woman who thinks she can't use her skills, her emotional intelligence and her social skills to manipulate and hurt and get revenge, dangerous.
Exactly. And
I'm around those people.
We are killer machines being trained in the jungle for millions of years. It's dangerous to lie at that. And to be honest, it's superficial and arrogant and immature. It's childish.
And there's something, I want to come back to this feeling I had when I met you of being seen or being allowed even. And it was like, oh my God, it was almost like I can be friends with this person. And also like I can do business with this person as well. It's like we're actually business partners now, right? Like around the conference and other things. And it was a feeling of like, I don't want to say safety because that word's so overused, but it was, what's the female perspective on that? Like, is there a feeling of like, hey, I'm with a guy here who maybe gets his own shadow or understands women a bit more? Like, how does that feel from the other side? Because for me, it was such a rare, I think because I was in Berlin and I hadn't had it in a few days, Berlin, by the way, is the place in the world where I feel least allowed as a man.
Interesting. So interesting. I do not know how it started. I think writing the book about my time as a prostitute gave me those 2 years of writing for digesting deeper and zooming more into what were the narratives and motives underneath. And for example, what I discovered about clients in general, or many clients in many brothels all over the world, they do not come into a brothel in order to be the sex monster and the dark soul that they are in reality. They come into a brothel in order to feel safe with wanting emotional honesty and intimacy with a woman. Like, men hide from society their emotional needs or their needs for being touched and their needs for being met as humans. So it's like there is such a range of shadows. And when we look under the surface of, oh, this is sex, or this is a penis, or this is whatever, if we look under these packages for those charges, then we see mammals being designed for meeting each other and supporting each other in a jungle, and then being traumatized, fragmented, and taught to only function in roles. And especially the male trauma around functioning is deeply contempting of men. it doesn't protect anybody.
Can you say more about this contempt of men? Because I know a lot of men's rights guys who notice this. And for example, if you watch any advert, nearly all advertisements on British TV show men as either childlike and in need of mothering, or bad. So they're either bad or they're, and you'll see this in Hollywood as well. Like all the latest Star Wars films have these archetypes of the men who are kind of incompetent and a bit stupid who need to be mothered, or that they're evil. And it's like, wow, so either you're a little boy or you're evil? That doesn't sound like great options.
Exactly. There is no space for breathing and no space for individual masculinity. And I think where men come from is a kind of castration and also the kind of narrative of the culture, because you have a penis, you are a potential threat. And people around you are afraid because you are a man. So this makes you as a man being trapped in an inescapable dilemma, because due to biology, you are a problem. So how do you try to cope with that? You hate yourself. You hide yourself from yourself and from everybody around. And then not being manly enough. That is such a inescapable violence being put into male bodies. And there is like a tragic vicious circle of women not feeling safe around men in patriarchal systems, so they as mothers and other women try to keep men down. Like they don't trust the beauty and the supportive character of true male independence and freedom and power and love, so they try to castrate men. And this kind of unfreedom of I shrink for you and you shrink for me, let's say that this is intimacy. No.
Let me just jump in there, because I think what you just said was brilliant. So if you don't trust that masculinity can be good and noble and safe, of course you'll castrate men. Of course you'll try and get rid of it.
Of course, and that's a vicious circle, because men are deeply traumatized by, for example, their mother who did her best, and still she grew up in a culture devaluating her as a woman. So who is she feeling safe around a man? So she tries to castrate her son and keep him down. And then later on, he wonders why he thinks that he's not worthy of love and freedom at the same time. And especially the split. In order to meet a woman, you have to hide that you want to be free.
Ilan, how do we get past the gender pain? So what I really hear, for example, if I bring any of these things up, which is a strong evidence base for, very logical, and it's obvious when you watch TV, it's obvious when you look at the statistics. But when I bring this up to a lot of women, they just there's so much pain. They immediately kick back to, but what about us? And what about, didn't you know that men are the most dangerous thing to women on the planet? Did you know the statistics for rape? Do you know? And I know that stuff. Like I've read that stuff and I know it personally. I've sat with friends crying who have been raped. I'm not, I'm not blind to that side of things.
And I'm sexually traumatized myself by men. So just to make sure, this is not about me talking here as a white privileged girl who didn't see hell.
Right. That's important. People know. How do we get to a point where, and as men as well, when a woman says to us, hey, did you know that sexual violence against women is much higher than against men, which is still the case, but there's much more sexual violence against men than is reported, but it still seems massively more the case. And you'd expect that given physical size differences that people don't admit, but just that you would expect that. And how do we as men hear that without going, but what about men? But did you know about divorce and all my friends that have lost all their money and all their friends that can't see their kids because of the blah, blah, blah. There's just like the feminists and the men's rights people, like an empathy collision.
Yeah.
And even the less extreme people have a bit of that. It's very hard for people to stop and listen to the other point of view.
So coming from collective trauma, research, background, etc., I think, or I see, we have only one option left, and that is accepting altogether that the problem is way bigger than we thought. We are still playing the kindergarten level of I'm traumatized, so there is somebody else out there who just traumatized me and is not traumatized him or herself. And this is why we have, but my pain is bigger than your one. Know what? my pain is an ocean, and it's as big as your ocean. And I have to heal in a matrix that makes space for 2 oceans. And if it takes that, 7.6 billion oceans of pain. This is a lot. We come from 6,000 years of traumatizing everybody, every human nervous system in this culture. There is no way around. It's just silly saying that only women would be traumatized. And if women now listen to my words or your words or whatever and feel that they have to decide, let's have empathy with the boys instead of the girls, no, let's have empathy with the boys and the girls and all those other sexes that are also traumatized by our culture, not allowing them to have any other kind of sex. That's all, like, it's a bunch of expressions of structural violence against trusting human nature, being powerful, free, and loving at the same time.
Nice.
It's reflecting on the level of gender as well, but it's reflecting on every level. If you do not force people to work, they wouldn't work. That's not true. That's just not true.
Yeah, I've been working for the last 2 weeks. No one's forced me to. It's just like all the projects I've been doing the last couple of weeks.
Humans are good beings. They are good beings when it comes to sex. They are good beings when they have vulvas. They are good beings when they have penises. They are good beings when it's about to work or to sleep or to whatever. We studied the jungle. We know how to self-regulate as a mankind nervous system.
So I agree with you on that. 100 trainers just volunteered to teach free sessions for doctors and nurses.
Yeah.
Someone said, you'll never get enough trainers. And I said, we'll get enough trainers. I sent an email out, 100 emails right back. Within 2 days, 100 emails. We only need another few. It
feels better to support at the end of the day than to be supported once we get out of the survival burnout level of I need support, otherwise I will just collapse.
Right. When people have got the basics covered, they start trying to help other people very easy. I've seen this with disabled children. I've seen this with special needs people, like very natural urge to help other people once your basic needs are met for yourself and you're not in that terror of fight flight. What do you teach people then, Ilan? Let's slow it down a little. On your workshops, if someone, you could call them Carly's Kiss. I'd love to hear a bit about the name.
Yeah, Carly's
Kiss. And what do you teach people? Like if someone turns up to one of your workshops, I imagine you've moved online like most people now.
Yeah.
Like, what are you teaching them?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I gave the name Carly's Kiss to my work something like 12 years ago. And now I deeply regret it because, of course, it's like calling for the challenge, calling for the wounding in order to tap into this is a kiss and not a curse. But I feel like I study wounding on an individual and collective level and draw all my confidence in we can regulate and heal from us as physical beings. So what I teach is basically us coming together as a tribe, because we are meant to come together as a tribe, online or offline, and a lot of shaking, a lot of offering my nervous system a language that allows my nervous system, my instinctual brain, my belly brain to unwind from cultural stress. And especially when it comes to shutdown, all those places that I stopped feeling as a girl, as a woman in this society, as a human being nowadays, whatever, all those layers, can we become alive? And it is such a blessing journey, because the more I become alive, I realize, whoa, I'm grateful for life, and life is fucking awesome. Not because it's a beach party on Bali all day long, because it's intense, because I feel it. I will feel my death. What a wonderful kind of death. What a wonderful way of dying, that I can inhale and exhale, being fully present. Like embodiment experiences in themselves pay off when it comes to joy of life. But what we need in order to go there is some kind of encouragement as a tribe and as individual. Take pride in your wounding, take pride in your shadows, take pride in your projections. Like, stop running around with a self-image that everything inside of you is quite okay. those people who say that everything is quite balanced are the most boring people I can ever meet.
Well, you're certainly not boring, Ilan. You're certainly not that. I've never been bored in your company. Oh.
Mark, you are not boring. Yes, to say that in the camera, Mark, not boring.
I'm ADHD as fuck. So if I'm not bored by someone, it normally is a sign they're saying something interesting and novel and I haven't heard a million times before. I always like listening to you, and you can speak for hours deeply on so many subjects. And maybe we'll be back in a month or so. And we still got a little time here. Looking at your YouTube channel here. So I've been taking notes or I've been speaking. By the way, if people watching videos see me on my phone, I'm taking notes. I'm not. In case
you become nervous because
Mum,
nowadays
I'm talking to a German prostitute. What should I say? There's a video here, how to become a better lover. Why don't we lighten it up a little bit? As we come towards the end, we come out of the depths of the how to become a better lover. That's 7.46 minutes. I will text that to my wife now. And I don't need it, obviously. I'm fine, Ilan. I'm fine. So what? Give us the gist then. Tell us about that video, how to be a better lover. And there's another one here, how to deal with social distancing. So I think both of those will be interesting to a lot of people right now.
Yeah, let's talk about the lover video, because what I love so much is turning our narratives around. Like when I'm about how do I become a better lover, it's about, oh, what can I do better for you? But the truth is, when we come from an embodiment and energy perspective, and not a perspective of technique and doing, but of being, then when I touch you with the frequency of relaxation, trust, and intimacy, or stress and unsettledness in my nervous system. So this is so interesting, for example, for men who learned that whenever they become somehow like authentic in bed, that they are a potential killer. What a threat in their own nervous system.
Authentic man. As soon as I hear the word authentic around someone, any man who says an authentic lover, do you not just want to run a mile?
Maybe, but that wasn't what I was referring to.
Sorry, Ilan. Sorry, I misunderstood.
It's just being somehow breathing into my own belly brain and trusting my own energy and perception. When I never learned to do that because I get hypnotized by the technique, I touch my partner with a lot of stress in my nervous system. And since there is another mammal touched, this nervous system, in this case from a woman, might get some impression that something is off, or that women are fragile. And I think at the end of the day, this doesn't pay off. So how about that I become a better lover by relaxing more into a depth of trust in myself being good? And I think the biggest needle mover, I do not know if this is manageable, but the biggest needle mover for individual and collective sexual healing for men and women would be that there is a path for men overcoming and healing their sexual self-mistrust.
So slow it down. My brain's slow today and you're quick. Also for the foreign language speakers, moving the needle means having an impact, just to be clear, as a metaphor, right?
Impact, the biggest big leap around collective and individual sexual healing for men and women would be that there is a path offered to men overcoming their deep sexual self-hatred and self-mistrust. If men could embody the truth that they are powerful sexually and good sexually, that they are wired for supporting the jungle inside and outside when they are sexually free. If this would be available as a felt sense for men, we would delete sexual violence overnight from the whole planet. And
there's a big connection between men's sex shame and sex violence. Maybe you could make that explicit.
Of course, if men are told that the only thing waiting inside of them is a mess of shadow, of hell, of sexual torture and violation against women, they will never tap into their truth.
Yeah, interesting. As a man,
there is a shadow layer in you and in me, etc. But there is something underneath the shadow, and we need a culture cultivating us for embodying the shadow energies until the shadow unwinds like the brothel that unwinded in front of your eyes. It has been a brothel since 10 years, Mark.
Yeah, it's just around the corner, hidden from view,
It's
just
like
around the
that.
little alley.
The moment you tap into your shadow is the moment the shadow is weaker than ever before. And I never saw men with such a radiant kind of sexual self-love than in a setting that I was leading, but I somehow wasn't, I wasn't listening, but men were sitting in circles telling about their sexual shame, the hardcore porn they are consuming, how they cheat their girlfriend and whatever. They were told to tell about every sexual aspect of their life that they feel ashamed for. Look into each other's eyes, really having some kind of brotherhood around that. And they stood up so radiant, so beautiful. For me as a woman, so amazingly attractive.
Yeah.
Because they owned their shadow, and by that made it turn back into the power and the freedom and the love and the desire and the being wired to provide.
Yeah.
When it comes to which sex is more supportive for the partner, definitely the male sexuality. Women are wired so much more around this should be for me about myself, and men are so much more willing to say, hey, I can decide between your orgasm and my orgasm. I prefer your one. I never heard a woman say that. Never.
There's a great comedian called Owen Benjamin, who I think you really like. He's like a lovable Labrador, and he's quite conservative, and he talks about how men just want to serve. We're like, there's that like, yeah, I'll give you an orgasm, no problem. How do I do it? What do I do? Just tell me what to do. I'll do it. You know, he's a great comedian. I really recommend
and women are conditioned to having to please men, but men are genuinely delighted when they please a woman. And for me as a woman, it's like, what's so much fun for you about that? I never heard women so honestly sharing, I light up when you are delighted sexually.
There's a certain swagger if I walk out of a lover's apartment, like, yeah, she couldn't talk at the end of that. She'll be walking funny for a week, high-fiving myself, like, job done. Like, there's a satisfaction in that.
There is something that might be twisted on the surface, but there is something of our true design or essence being hidden in those layers of our saying or our macho or whatever behavior. There is something essential that is somehow visible or a felt sense in that, and I'm fascinated by that.
There's something real underneath the macho bravado there, isn't there?
Yeah, and it is reflected. It's not that our mask or role plays are only off. The shadow is closer to the truth than we think it is. There is something true and essential reflected in our patterns and structures.
And how do you move from, so I would consider myself pretty sex positive in that, you know, any consensual, non-harming sex, I think is a good thing. And people can do what they want to do. That's their business. And I, you know, grew up in a relatively sex positive household, considering the era, you know, kind of particularly my mom, I think I thank her for kind of what she passed on, you know, around nakedness and sexuality, and was never told it was a shameful thing, but there was still some messages a little bit there and some messages in society for sure. And as a guy, it's like I can be cognitively like okay with sex and my own sexuality, but there's always this fear of being creepy as a guy, particularly as you get older as a man. What I experience is you're more likely to be perceived as creepy as you get older.
Yeah,
there's a certain immunity that goes, and a fear that's there of like, how will I be perceived as I got called predatory the other day for making a very, it's a while back actually now, but for making a very polite gesture that the person involved was actually totally okay with. Just to be clear, the girl involved was like, yeah, no problem, this was fine. She's like, actually, I've got a boyfriend, but it's nice to meet you, no problem. She was cool, I was cool, but someone else observed it and used this word predatory, which I really disliked, because I reserved that for people who are, you know, sex offenders or people who rape people or things like that. And I was like, wow, you can just put that on me as a label. And I felt such shame, even as someone that grew up pretty sex positive. So how do we move from the cognitive sex positive to actually the felt sense of it?
I mean, just as always, embody the energy. embody it. And it's like the next layer of shame that hits you or me around some kind of sexual or asexual behavior is the next Kali's kiss. It's the next kind of, wow, I thought I would only be sex positive. There is only one guy standing around blaming me and I feel shame. How do I unwind shame as a biological instinct when I do not feel safe? It's embodying. And
I even noticed that in this conversation, Ilan, it was, when I was telling the story about meeting the prostitute smoking, which by the way is an entirely true story, I had a voice in my head saying, what if people don't believe this story and think that you were blah, 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 what if blah, 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 what if, I've had that voice in my head at least 4 times on this call because I know it's a public thing.
Yeah, so interesting. So it's really the traces of cultural confusion are not outside, they are inside, and they are inside, costing us at the end of the day a deeper and even deeper level of pleasure and embodiment all over. So it's I think welcoming the shame, welcoming the inner voice, because an inner voice is not an inner voice, it's a contraction in my nervous system. What does a nervous system of a mammal do in order to overcome stress? It shakes. So we shake. We shake whenever we feel ashamed. What a great gift. Another fucking opportunity for growth. Yeah.
It's reminded me to do my TRE shaking after my gym workout this morning.
Yeah.
Lots of traumatized doctors at the moment, so I definitely need to do that. Thank you for the reminder. That in my calendar so I don't forget. It's funny how I forget that when I need it most. I remember being in a war zone. I was there for a week before I remembered I knew trauma releasing exercises.
Wow.
I was like, hang on a minute, I should be doing this every day.
Because in the first place, it feels dangerous. When we start shaking, we tap into the mammal brain in us that doesn't want to stop shaking. We don't want to start because then we don't want to stop.
Oh, don't mind me keep interrupting you, by the way. It's just for anyone of the feminists listening, I do it to men too, okay? Not just to women. So I find with the trauma shaking, it actually, if I shake through the trauma, it becomes a sort of writhing pleasure activity.
Yeah.
And I think there's something in that once the trauma gets shaken off, underneath is, and I really enjoy TRE now. I find it really like this liquid, pleasurable, once I get past that initial shake, which isn't always so fun. So for me, that seems almost symbolic of a lot of the things you're saying.
The first wave is the hardest one because we come from a shutdown culture that pretends or that gives us a solution. Everything is all right. And when we tap into this is a shutdown instead of reality, we tap into the not so sexy, not so pleasurable layers that we tended to by not shaking. So the first layers of shame are always, what I say in my seminars over and over again is, you shake when you want to do it the least. Don't wait for motivation. Motivation is around here just bullshit. You will keep shaking the moment you forced yourself. But there is this kind of confusion. Oh, my self-love means I'm not shaking because I'm not so into that.
Motivation is bullshit. Say it in German. Say it in German. Shout it in German. It's just my kink.
What?
Shout it in German. Motivation is bullshit.
Motivation is bullshit.
I get Daniela to shout at me at German sometimes. It motivates me. You know our Daniela, who we work with.
Motivation is bullshit. And motivation is bullshit. So it's fair. It's bullshit for everybody.
Oh, you get the genders there? You go for gender neutral. You've got that in German, haven't you?
No. This is not about gender. This is about nationalities.
Okay, we're doing nationality.
40 minutes ago, you tried to save the UK statistics around sex work from the German one.
I suspect they are a little different, though I suspect if we had your legalities, it would be the same. So I don't think, just to be clear, I'm not claiming
more. Just repeating the game, Mark. I will get you.
You already got me.
Okay.
Listen, Ilan, this is a delight as ever, but we need to wrap up. People can see you at the Embodiment Conference that you're going to be deeply involved with. You're sponsoring the Embodiment Conference, so you're going to be deeply involved in that. I'm
so excited about what you created there. I was
so happy when you stepped up to sponsor it, because I was worried we'd have this sponsor that I didn't believe in or that I didn't want to. Oh God, I'm going to have to prostitute myself. I'm going to have to take someone's money, and and then Rob says, "Oh, there's this person. This is what I do." And I met you. I was like, "This person's wonderful. I really want this person to sponsor."
I'm honored and happy and excited.
And where can people find out more about you and your work? What have you got going on? Give yourself a plug. Don't be shy. Be American.
say English. So Ilan Stephani on Facebook, on YouTube, and Kali's Kiss.
Great,
Just Kali's Kiss. If you Google that, you will find my existence over there.
Kali's Kiss on YouTube, on Facebook, and also on the main website, which has got different online events and things. And yeah, this has been a total pleasure. So to finish, a closing message about the body, short and sweet. Give us a Kali's Kiss on the cheek to say goodbye.
Shake it till you make it.
Nice. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.